Welcome everyone to Coming Home. I am Christine and I am delighted to introduce Maxim to you today. He is on a program called The Preparation. I'm going to read a little bit from his Substack and then I'll pass over to Maxim to explain it far better than I can. I am acting as a guinea pig for a program which is meant to prepare young men for the future. This program is designed to be a replacement for the only three routes advertised to young men today: to go to college, or university as we call it, the military, or a dead-end job. This program, which we can call the preparation, is meant to guide young men on a path where they properly utilize their time to gain skills, build relationships, and reach a state of being truly educated. The preparation is meant to set young men up for success. Welcome, Maxim.
Thank you for having me on, Christine. I really appreciate it. So yeah, the preparation, like you just said, from the writing there on the Substack page, is a program primarily for young men, just because everyone who's acting and trying to design this program is or was a young man at some point. So that's our only perspective that we can work with at the moment. But it's a program primarily designed for young men to, as you said, be an alternative to college, university, the military, or getting a dead-end job right out of high school, basically. And the the replacement, being the preparation, is meant to educate people, help them become more competent, more capable, and dangerous in the way that they are. Because they're truly educated, they cannot be deceived easily. They cannot be led on to believe something that's untrue. They can become economically, financially independent. And with that, because of all the experiences that they will have within the 4-year time period of the preparation, they will be vastly more experienced and skilled in things that are applied to real life. And because they have the ambition and the desire to do those things on a 4-year basis, there's no doubt that whoever goes through this program would develop a vast network of people who are interested in what they're doing. And I think that also makes a person dangerous. But I mean, speaking of dangerous, just along that path, if you're educated, you're verbally dangerous. Your writing can become very persuasive, which is dangerous. And a big aspect of the preparation is martial arts, so physically dangerous as well. But yeah, dangerous, competent, educated. Those are I would say, the prime words to describe the program at the moment.
Mm, that's an amazing,
Yeah.
incredibly rich, complex introduction. We could spend, I don't know, the whole weekend going over just what you've said there, but we won't. All right then. So why, Maxim, are you doing this?
Well, I'm doing it because I think I started off in the same position that a lot of young men start off in nowadays. When I was about 17, I was very uh, frustrated with the world and disappointed with myself. And really, the frustration I had with the world was because of my own personal disappointment. And that came from a place of having no clear direction, no aim, and no why, no reason to do things, which is, I think, something that's very common nowadays for young men to have. And again, I can only speak for young men because the world funnels you into primarily, at least in the Western world, into these three categories. I don't know what it's like in New Zealand for the military, at least, but you're either going to college, university, the military, or going straight into a dead-end job. And life is very formulaic. I mean, pretty much all you get is, okay, you get through in the US high school, you go to college, you get a dead-end job and you hope that you can somehow work your way up the ladder within that job and make it a career. You get married, you have kids, you retire, and you die. That's a very, like I said, formulaic process. Who would actually want to go through that? And I think especially now that college is proving itself to be something that isn't going to supply you with any, I mean, it certainly doesn't give you the guarantee of a a good job. You may get the degree, but the degree doesn't guarantee you anything. And it certainly doesn't guarantee you any real life skills. So not only do you not have skills and are going to be in debt and may not even have an actual job coming out of that, but you are 4 years behind already. I mean, maybe even more than that at that point. And you have no real life experience, no skills, so you're behind the eight ball by a lot. And now you're stuck. You're in debt, so you have to use the degree you have to hopefully find a job that relates to it. And if you can't, then you get a different dead-end job not related to the degree, and you have to work to pay off that debt. And a few years ago, I met a man who went to college. I don't know what for, but I think he was eight or 10 years out of school, and he was still paying off his college debt. So all the time, even in the future, past college is now sacrificed to those 4 years and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that you have. And there's no time to gain any skills. So I think with that layout of things and with the idea that college is becoming less and less useful, and obviously so, young men feel trapped and very unsure of what to do in the future. So I was that at that point when I was 17. And then Doug Casey, who is part of the program and helped create the first idea of the program, um, he developed a very short list of games, activities, and occupations that he thought if young men knew even just a few of these things and ventured out to try to at least have a little bit of experience in all of them, that they would be much more capable than the rest. So some examples of the list of games were chess, poker, go, and bridge. Activities were becoming a private pilot, scuba diving, um, auto racing, golf, tennis, martial arts, learning a second language, learning guitar or piano, lots of different things like that. And then the occupation section had entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, writing, lecturing, the trades. So that would include welding and electrical work, plumbing, masonry, carpentry, all of that. But I was given this list or shown this list that Doug created, and my father helped me start out from that list, using that list. And EMT, which is an emergency medical technician, was one of the things on the occupations list. So I chose that as my main objective during that time, as well as chess and guitar and Spanish. So I started off there. I went through EMT school, which was 4 months long, and started to develop a little bit of competency in chess, improved my Spanish a little bit. But that's really where the program started, and that's why it started, was because I was lost, like a lot of other young men are. And just that small list, which was the root, the the source of this program, uh, started everything out, basically.
Mm, mm. It sounds like a really intentionally broad spectrum of ways to equip a young man with everything he's going to need to be, like you say, a great man as he matures into manhood. The reason that I was excited to be able to interview you, Maxim, is that as we've chatted before we started, I have a podcast for homeschooling families. In most situations for home educating, you are free to curate your own curriculum without compromising any of the basics.
Right.
So there is an ideal scenario in which families who are now can see that there are alternatives, because that's another subject in itself. I don't think it's well known that there are alternatives to the traditional way we've been corralled into going. So part of that is let's open parents' eyes, especially as to what the possibilities are, what you're doing. And then, as part of the curriculum that they set up at home for their young and even growing students at home, they can deliberately be channeling the things that you're starting to talk about as actually part of their curriculum. It's not an either or, it becomes merged into the
Mhm.
future because it's intentional. Now, just moving over to, no, actually, I won't. I'm just going to move back as to why this is a really good idea. Like you've mentioned, the whole education system, it really is failing our children. In all Western countries, New Zealand would be similar to the States. And so, right from preschool, which you are now actively encouraged to do because you've got to pass your children over to the experts, right through to the into university, it's being run by cultural Marxism, really. So for those who do not want to do that, what are you going to do? So I started to interview some people. What are the alternatives to going to university? And I interviewed Chris McIntosh, and he was talking about mentoring through like a 3-year period, not at university, but it would be similar too, and how to actually go about that in a practical sense. And I thought, wow, that is very doable for homeschooling families. But how? How do we go about that? Because often the traditional way of living, like you've just said, you do this, this, and this, and then you die, it's been set up for the bulk of the population, like we're modern day serfs. And the knowledge of how to break out of that is carefully kept away for all kinds of reasons. So to discover that there is an alternative is one thing, but it's the how you go about this after this that is the mystery to families. So watching you doing what you're doing, seeing Doug and your father setting you up like this, it's like a whole portal opening up of possibilities. And I think this is such an exciting concept for homeschooling. Right. So that being said, is there anything you would like to tag on to that little bit of rhetoric I've
Well,
just given you?
I I completely agree that homeschooling, I think there were a lot of interesting things I experienced within middle school in the US and the brief period I went to high school, which was 3 months, and that was during COVID, and it was all online. And what happened in homeschool, or sorry, the middle school, which was a private school, was they started showing us, they created an entire new class, which they labeled a leadership class. And they started teaching us about, I think it was around Halloween at that point. So they showed us a Teen Vogue video that was about which Halloween costumes you shouldn't wear because it was cultural appropriation. It started off there and it got a whole lot worse, even to the point where several of the teachers were accusing eighth grade boys, which are boys around 14 years old, 13, 14 years old, of sexual assault and harassment. for things that were absolutely not that, but it all stemmed from the same place, out of that one new leadership class they made. And then going into high school, which was a public school, um, I had my math teacher talking about her favorite politicians, just out of nowhere. They were talking about pronouns in science class. And the principal, it was the principal, was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. So I think really the only option, at least up until teenage years for education, is homeschooling. Absolutely. Because the idea of giving up your parental responsibility to educate your children, which we could go back to Marcus Aurelius and just I'm paraphrasing, but in Meditations, he briefly mentions how he was thankful to his father for investing heavily in his education outside of public education. So I think each parent has an obligation to at least ensure that those teaching their kids are good people, that the curriculum's good, but above and beyond that, to teach your own children or find people who can teach your own children. Um, Otherwise, you are, I think, failing in that regard. So I think absolutely, homeschooling up until a certain age is the only option. But the way that the preparation can fit into that, that I think a lot of homeschool is missing, is real life experience. And I think a lot of homeschooling, where it originates from, was small communities where there was no school within the community, and the parents or another group of parents were teaching the children, but there were also plenty of real life outdoor activities, which doesn't have to be outdoor necessarily, but real life activities where you have to build something, create something, do something of importance that actually educates you in an entirely different way outside of an academic realm. And I think preparation can fit into homeschooling in a person's teenage years into their 20s by having those real life experiences and gaining actual skills. I mean, I went to EMT school, like I said, so now I have at least a foundational sense of medical knowledge and the ability to use that knowledge. And I went to a rope rescue course, so I have that area of skills as well. Riding is something I've done quite a lot in the preparation. That's another part of it. And that riding is based off of the real life skills that I've been pursuing. So I think that's the other additional component and how the preparation can fit into traditional homeschooling. Does that seem does that seem true to you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So if I took a couple of the examples that you gave, you did an EMT course, highly medical, first aid, responding to emergency situations, people skills. Um, yeah, that'll do. So within each one of those segments already, you've got important aspects that can become part of a curriculum that just so happen to teach that, but it becomes part of the science curriculum. You're now learning about physiology because you have to be able to recognize what's going on. How do you
Right.
assess somebody's emergency situation? Well, you need to know the skeletal structure, the muscle structure, what are the things to look for? How do you take a pulse? What's all that about? So rather than just a boring old textbook that you just work through chapter after chapter, you're now taking that opportunity and then finding what's in your science books or other resources to teach that, which then just so happens at the end of whatever records you have to teach, tick, tick, tick. But you've
Yep.
done it in a way that just far supersedes what your average academic scholarship is going to do. What was the other one? You mentioned Marcus Aurelius. I can go to that one, but rope tying. What a skill that's been lost. So there's the very practical reasons as to why you would tie a rope. Highly skilled handwork, brain coordination. What's the history behind that rope work? Well, there you go. Now you've got another opportunity. It's one thing to tie the knots, but why do we use them? Where does that idea come from? And suddenly you're starting to look at a historical context of it as well. Tick, tick, tick. But it's so much more practical, let alone interesting and useful for
Hmm.
what you're doing. Marcus Aurelius, that you mentioned, well, the Roman civilization and Latin by default forms a huge part of our Western civilization.
Yeah.
I don't need to explain what we can do with that. It's not just Marcus Aurelius in a little box, it's all these other things coming off it. Well, he wrote in Latin and probably a few other languages too, which you are doing. What use does Latin have for us now? Plenty. You would have come across it in some of your physiology doing EMT. Most of the base words in medicine. Yeah. So,
Right. Yeah. Well,
so
there's two tracks here,
mm,
um, with homeschooling and the preparation being combined, is that you have the education track. So yes, you're going out and actually learning real life skills, and one thing leads to the next, and so the opportunities for education and learning are endless. But so you have the education track, and then you have the setting yourself up for the future track, where the same rule of one thing leads to another applies. The whole reason why I went to that rope rescue course is because I went to the EMT course. And then that rope rescue course, even though I didn't end up using it this past year, um, but it was the reason why I went there was because of the EMT certification that I got earlier on. This past summer, I ended up working on wildfires in the US, as an EMT. And one of the jobs you can have is a rope rescue technician on those wildfires. So one thing really does lead to another. It's EMT course, rope rescue class. Around the same time, I got the qualifications to become a Type 2 wildland firefighter. I guess it's Type 2 firefighter, which is a wildland firefighter. And all of that, which stemmed from just taking the 4-month EMT class, led me on to working on the wildfires in the US, learning even more and getting even more opportunities within that.
mm,
So, education and setting yourself up for the future, I think, are the two main things. And I mean, I haven't seen that many homeschooling curriculums before, but I think some of what it fails to do sometimes is to recognize that the child is going to have to enter into the real world and they need real world skills. And the only way to get those skills are to do things in the real world. So I think that's where the preparation and homeschooling can converge and create those two separate paths,
mm, mm,
um, which I think is very, very interesting to think about.
mm. It is. And you've got a lot of variety within homeschooling. You can get families who just simply replicate what's going on at school, but they're doing it at home. I don't understand that. And then as to why you would want to do that, you could just go to school and do that. But for those who want to homeschool, you get to choose how you're going to do this. Why would you want to replicate school when you can do so much more? If you're only replicating school, the bar is low, really low. And
Yes.
it's not, and so it's the purpose of a homeschooling family to make it the real world. Going to school is
Mhm.
not the real world. Since when is it real to go to a place where you are locked in literally during the day, where you have to sit with your peers of a certain age to listen to someone tell you something and be literally controlled by a bell? You can't even go to the bathroom without asking. That's not real. That's control technology. So homeschooling is has the opportunity just to leave all that behind and education is done almost surreptitiously. You don't even know, the child doesn't even know they're being educated. It becomes
Yeah.
kind of such an easy thing, but it teaches them to such a depth because they're so engaged with something that's interesting. We live close to the beach here in Auckland's North Shore. And why sit at home and read a science textbook when you can go down to the beach and do marine studies?
Yeah. Especially for young kids, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems with school, traditional school, is that you're forcing energetic kids to sit in the classroom all day to the point where they become completely uninterested with learning. So if you're doing that from the beginning, of course, you're going to end up with depressed teenagers, increased suicide rates, and a ton of teenage, or not just teenagers, a ton of kids on ADHD meds and who can't focus and have to because they have to sit still in class all day, and they're uneducated and they have no interest. I mean,
Mm,
it's terrible. So yes, I think absolutely,
mm,
especially for younger kids, getting them out to do things in the real world
mm.
again. Yeah.
Well, even as our children got older, and we ended up home educating our children right through, they all finished at home, and then each of them went on to um, university, which we wouldn't necessarily do now that we know more. Um, so it's very doable. But even when they were in their teens, the bookwork, if you like, because the requirements do increase as they're getting older, written work, and their maths, etc. Pretty much it's done by the morning. Here's
Yeah.
a fun fact for you. The average time of learning in a school, right from the little ones right through into high school, including the expensive private schools, is about an hour and a half a day.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that little.
Yes. Actual
Huh.
productive learning. And you've written before about time and how we can waste it and putting it to good use. So if you're concentrating at home in just the morning, you can be pretty much done by lunchtime. And sure, as they're into their teens and the study level goes up, yeah, you might have some more things to do in the afternoon. Um, all right then. Now, moving on from a practical sense, applying these possibilities to homeschooling families. Two families that don't really even know what other skills are important in life. And you had Doug and your father map out a really, really good list. That's a wonderful start because I'm sure they would add more to it now, as probably you would. And individual families would add things that were really important to those lists too. That gives you your what's important list. And so now we'd be moving from, say, now we know what because we've got a list. How are we going to meet all those what's? And I think that's probably where many families just start falling over and defaulting to a traditional because they don't know the how. They've never been shown that. If they came across an opportunity, sometimes it was more by good luck. So purposefully going out and arranging these things is totally doable for homeschooling families. So I think on your list, let's just go back to you talked about what it meant to be dangerous. That's a
Mhm.
fascinating word because instantly it has unsafe, which is actually in a positive sense unsafe. We know that's it's a good terminology, but to many people they're going, why do I want a boy that's going to be dangerous, you know? But explain again what it means to learn to be part of your preparation is to be dangerous, and then we can try and see how we can find activities, mentors, courses that would feed into that idea.
Well, yeah, that's one of the problems with using the word dangerous is especially I use that word, my dad, at least my dad and I use the word dangerous because it's appealing to young men. Even just that word alone, without any context behind it, is appealing to young men. But the reason why it's important to be dangerous, and of course, dangerous doesn't just mean it does include being physically dangerous. I mean, I think any young man should know how to defend himself, whether that be through boxing or Muay Thai or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or some other martial art, getting competent within that. It's not just the physical aspect, though, it's being able to articulate yourself in a very clear and, when necessary, persuasive manner, whether that be verbally or through writing, is also incredibly important because the more articulate you become, the more likely every avenue worth pursuing becomes more, the potential of those things becoming more open to you grows. Like the potential of you becoming financially independent because you are articulate verbally and through writing significantly increases because then you are able to understand other articulate people and their writing and to work in harmony with other people towards a certain goal, which can make you financially independent. But, or I mean, maybe you write a great book that can make you, if it's really great, can make you financially independent. But even without that, you are going to be much more well educated if you yourself are articulate, because, as I said, you can understand complex language. Like most of the things worth reading, at least in my opinion, are books that are definitely at least over 100 years old, at least for understanding history. And all of that is going to require a different level of, how would I say it? A different level of the ability to understand and infer what a person is saying. And as you take all that language, you're going to become more articulate yourself. Plus, you're gaining more interesting knowledge, which can help you in the future and educate you in the present. So there's two aspects of that word dangerous, and part of it's physical, part of it's uh, mental, really. And both those are combined to help you act a certain way, act um, more efficiently within the world. Because I mean, especially within recent years, it's become clear that the world is it's not full of sunshine and rainbows. If you are a dangerous individual, not a threat, that's something very different. If you are dangerous, you are you can be a force of nature, a positive force of nature. Um, and that's what the word, how we're using the word dangerous specifically.
Mm. That's a very good clarification, and I think it's a much more accurate description of what it is to be dangerous. Um, what about so you've got physical, mental. What about also, I guess it's implied, but in a spiritual sense too? Would you categorize the importance of that in there?
It depends on what you mean. What do you mean exactly by
Oh, good question,
spiritual?
Maxim. Let's get articulate and precise with my
Yeah.
words. Well done, you.
Yeah.
Good call. So I'm speaking from a Christian perspective. So if you were articulate, knowledgeable, and confident in your faith in God, and the Christian religion being the underpinning of what makes the West successful in the first place, that fitting into also what is creates the strength that makes you dangerous in the context that you've talked about.
Hmm. Well, if we're talking about Christianity specifically, going along with the Western world. In what part of, just to get even more specific, what part of or what aspects of Christianity do you think are worth considering towards the idea of becoming spiritually dangerous? Like what would fall or what would go along with that? Like what are the specific aspects of Christianity that would potentially make someone a force for good, let's say?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
That you would recognize that not only yourself, but every other person is made in the image of God. Treat them as such. Difficult to do with difficult people. The whole concept of forgiveness, that in life you will come across people who are going to treat you badly. So to be able to forgive without um, not, I don't mean forgive and forget and everything is nice and light and rainbows again, as you said. It's forgiveness that sets you free, but it grows you in that it changes the way well, definitely God's forgiveness on us for our own misdoings or missing the mark is what sin means, missing the mark. Unforgiveness can create a lot of bitterness, resentment, retribution, which is not setting up for good at all. There's no freedom in that. So there's the aspect of forgiveness, the aspect of creativity in the sense that God gave us creativity, and that's what in a capitalist environment means that we can create and we can create inventions, finances for the better good. There are cultures that get trapped into that because it's outside that. So that's just some little measure of a specificness there. Also, over the last few years, the importance of in one's faith recognizing God as the ultimate lawgiver and not the government, so that there will be times when you have to say, no, I'm not doing that, and take the consequences for that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, that's enough for now.
Well, I understand what you mean more now. Part of the preparation, which we're developing a book for it at the moment, my father, Doug, and I, a big part of it, which we, at least at the current moment, are placing towards the beginning of the book, is about creating your own moral code. And that, I think, ties in absolutely with becoming spiritually dangerous because you are taking on personal responsibility. And with that, in that section, we are telling the individual to outline their own moral code, actually write down the things that they will allow themselves to do and the things that they will not allow themselves to do, so that there is a clear line in the sand that they will not cross. That it is that they're placing it there. A culture, a society, a government is not doing it for them, not even their friends or family, but they are outlining the line in the sand. And of course, when we're talking about morals, that goes in combination with, it goes hand in hand with virtues, which virtue could be industry, it could be moderation, it could be temperance, could be a vast number of things. I mean, you could just take Benjamin Franklin's list of 13 virtues that he practiced. It was 13 virtues, 13 weeks, I think 3 times a year. He would practice this and start off from there. But there is something the aspect of the program that goes along with the moral code is where someone's trying to reach towards something higher, which I think personally, you can have all the skills in the world, you can have all this education, you can have a network of people, you can be financially independent, but if you are not the person you want to be, if you're not even aiming towards being a good person, good in the truest sense of the word, then you can throw everything else out the door. None of it matters. So, yes, to go back to your original question, I think becoming, as you said, spiritually dangerous is a big part of that, and how we are trying to attach that into the program is through a moral code, because I think that's a great starting point. It gets an individual to um, take immediate action by writing these things down and formulating an idea of how they will conduct themselves in the world properly, in a way that they will be maybe not proud, but content with how they are instead of being shameful. So yes, absolutely. I think that's another incredibly important aspect to everything, 100%, without a doubt.
There you go. All that came from you asking me to be more articulate in what I said. That was good. That was really good.
It's helpful to be articulate, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. One of the things I've said before in explaining why it's important to be well grounded in a Christian faith is that, like you said, you can have all of the smarts for academia. You can be the most skilled, astute investor, but if you don't have the good, and I'll define Christian ethics, it just makes you a clever devil. We've got enough of those in the world. We don't need to be educating any more. They're
Right.
dangerous people in the. What's that?
They are dangerous in the exact opposite of
Yeah.
way that we mean dangerous.
Mm,
They they don't have they don't have a compass to guide them, and you
mm,
need that compass. If you stray from that compass, you will feel it your entire life. You will feel disappointed. You will feel shameful. And I mean, I don't know who I was talking to recently. I think it was Michael Ferris, actually. And he has his own podcast. It's called Coffee and a Mic, and it's a great podcast.
okay, thank
But
you.
I think he was saying to me that he knows a lot of successful people, financially successful people, who basically don't ever have to worry about anything, but are also incredibly unhappy. And I think any happiness in life will not so much come from accomplishments or worldly things, we could say. It comes from how you conduct yourself and who you are. Exactly. So absolutely, that's the moral code, uh, spiritual essence part of
Mm,
things right there.
mm.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that it would make you, and I think it was hinted at before, to become a man of that capability. It makes you a threat, I think. We'll call them to the powers that be, because it's not in the state's interest to have a lot of independent thinkers beyond a certain percentage, we'll say, which
Mhm.
is why we have schools set up exactly how we have, and just that trajectory of the typical working life. So I'll leave that one just there. However, in something in the preparation, you must be mindful that to live a life like this will have consequences in any direction. Any choices we make have consequences to them. So if you're designing a life that's making you a great man, dangerous man in the good sense, how in the preparation are you preparing for any inevitable challenges, we'll call them, to that? Do you know what I mean? Do I need to be more specific?
Challenges as in life, natural challenges of life, or
No,
something.
authoritative challenges, we'll say.
Oh, I see. Well, like as in how you might encounter those challenges from people trying to stop you? Is that what you mean?
Yes, well, I'll give an example if you like. So, during the last 5 years, we were faced with a choice, let's say, of taking the jibby jab, we'll call it. And in New Zealand, it started off volunteer. They still maintained it was volunteer to this day, but it was actually mandated, and people were threatened with losing their jobs. They had to do it to keep their jobs in many cases. If
Yeah.
you didn't have your job, you couldn't pay your mortgage. You had your mortgage because you'd gone down the normal trajectory. So I'll go down the whole kind of finance and setting up as an alternative soon. But you were left with a choice that you didn't want to make.
Hmm.
So how would the preparation do your mental preparation as well as the physical necessities? Because you might have to live in a different way if you're having a lifestyle denied you or demands that you've got to stop doing something. I mean, say in the UK at the moment, that you have to register chickens, for goodness sake. Well, what happens if you
Yes.
don't register your chickens? Are they going to come and get them? What if I want to have three chickens so I can have my own eggs? So what would you do in a practical sense if that kind of authority was coming in and demanding that you changed aspects of your life? How does the preparation prepare you for making decisions where you might have to pivot?
I see what you're saying now. With a lot of the preparation is about gaining experience to gain skills. And a lot of that, you're going to have to venture outside of your immediate vicinity to do that, either by going to a different state or a different country, different continent to learn these new skills. So if you're uh, having to deal with, for example, like the lockdowns, for example, where you can't travel to certain places, you're just gonna, I think this is where we can use a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, which I believe goes, do what you can with what you have where you are. And sometimes you need to adapt. And I think you need to understand when to push back and when to adapt. I don't know exactly what circumstances would, I mean, I don't know of any circumstances that aren't necessarily extreme circumstances that require uh, a clear moral, a clear demand for moral people to push back in a very extreme way. Anything below that, that's more moderate stuff, I think, I don't know. I think adaptation is necessary because I don't think we don't have control over what a tyrant says or does, and sometimes we can't do anything about it. And I mean, a good example to use is just the US dollar now. I mean, you're going in the preparation, you're going to have to spend money to learn these skills. So you're dealing with inflation, which over time, the longer it takes for you to actually get out, pay for these experiences to learn these skills, the value of your dollar, the value of the amount of money you have is decreasing constantly. And that's something you have no say over. And you don't own any of your money in the first place. I mean, if we're taking a quote from the Bible, there's render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and the money's not yours. All the money you worked for is owned by someone else, and they can take it away at any time. So I think there's natural circumstances for adaptation and for pushback, but maybe sometimes you have to go real small and just you're confined to a small area, do what you can with what you have where you are, and other times you can expand out, travel to get new experiences and skills. And well, not even just that with the preparation, but in preparing you for life, I think it applies in the same way. we can't unless things came to a tipping point where uh clear punch in the face from morality is necessary for something much greater. There's not much you can actually do about those things. So adaptation, really.
Hmm. Which means you need to have something to adapt to and adapt from, which is the beauty of the intentionality of the preparation is
Yes.
for our young men. Because you're right, sometimes you can't do anything, but there's plenty you can do.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, so the financial part of it, and I mentioned before that if you go down the normal trajectory, you do end up in a financial trap. So that for those folk who did not want to take the jab, but they felt they had no choice because if they didn't, they lost their job and then they lose their house. If they had known that there was another way of creating income so that if we ever put in that situation again,
Mhm.
um, you're not beholden to authorities that say you have to do this because you now you've prepared for other means of income that gives you the freedom to not have to go down that route. So,
Yeah.
for example, in New Zealand, most people, the mums and dads would be invested in property. That's a typical New Zealand thing,
Okay.
and they don't have other aspects, stock markets, crypto, etc., gold, definitely not very well known, is a very small part of your average household's investment knowledge. But it's very kind of one basket, and it's also based on the whole debt system. So to get a shock like we did left them very vulnerable. So how in the preparation, and I think I don't know much of your father's background, but if he's working with Doug Casey, I think I know. We came across Doug Casey some years ago when we were introduced to the whole, investing world. So
Yeah.
I'm taking it as a given that in your preparation list, there is a ways to teach you through all of your skill building to also be building the skills, because you said before they're all interlocked, the whole kind of financial freedom aspect that comes with it. So to homeschooling families who aren't particularly knowledgeable about opportunities like that, have you got any very kind of let's go for young men your age. What would you tell them to be looking at, learning at, reading about now to set themselves up and prepare for their adulthood?
Well, in terms of the financial aspect of things, we will have um a brief economics section of the book, which is more about the philosophy around how to conduct yourself economically more than it is a step-by-step process of what to do, which most of the preparation isn't a step-by-step process. We will get very hyper specific about where you can go to learn specific skills and how much it'll cost, how much time it'll take you. This will all be in the book. But I think things like that need to be left up to the individual to pursue, and the philosophy of things matters more, um, or at least matters more in the beginning, just so that it's understood well enough in the first place, and that the proper framework is set of how to think about things. But I think the best thing young men can do is to not actually just read a ton of investment books or start day trading or watch uh, finance gurus on YouTube. The best thing they can do is gain skills. If you're, I mean, first off, you're pretty much never, I guess, in very, very rare, dire circumstances, you are beholden to tyrants, but you're pretty much never actually beholden to tyrants. It's all your choice, no matter what. You could lose your job, sure, but Are you doing the right thing by denying to take this thing that's obviously bad for everyone? Yes, you're doing the right thing, even though you'll lose something of vital importance to you. Um, but if you meet with a situation like that, your chances for success are much greater if you are self-employed. And the best way to become self-employed is to have a vast number of skills which you can draw from, most of which are just general, having a general knowledge, a foundational knowledge of a lot of skills, and maybe a more specialized knowledge of a few that you're interested in. But if you can increase your understanding of a wide variety of different things, you're already more effective in the world. And I mean, just going back to this past year within the first year within the preparation, it's a little over a year now. I My father created an account when I was very young, and he would put a little bit of money into that over time. So when I was 18, I was given this account that has the equivalent of a year's worth of tuition at a relatively prestigious school, university, college. And I've used that to gain skills over time, but the amount of resources I have now, after spending a lot of money on trying to acquire those skills, is greater than it was a year ago. So if you are able to, I mean, for parents listening to this, if you can accumulate at least a little bit of money for your kid to start off with, it just creates a compounding effect. The more skills they learn and are willing to learn, are eager to learn, ambitious to learn, the more people are going to be drawn to them and attracted to them to offer them more opportunities, whether that be economic opportunities or just experience-based opportunities, to where they can acquire more skills and more resources over time. And if you do that for 4 different years, or 4 compounding years, I mean, you're going to be much better off at the end of each year than you were at the very beginning in the first year. So it's it's a combination of, for parents, creating even just a very small pool of resources for your kids and helping them figure out where to start out. Like for me, it was EMT school. But for the individuals actually pursuing this, it's acquiring a wide variety of skills and specializing in a few that they want to specialize in. That's how you set yourself up for success. Absolutely. Is investing in yourself over time. And it'll benefit you financially and really in every other way. Uh, you'll gain more experiences, gain more friends, more mentors, more skills, and you'll have a stronger character at the end of the day. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's a long way of answering that question.
No, it's good because more and more, because what I'm trying to get homeschooling parents to relearn, if you like, especially if they grew up in the traditional sense of what education was and what success was, they have to unschool themselves to do that, or
Mhm.
de-school, I should say, shed something and relearn. So it's quite scary to willfully ditch that which society has says this is the path to success. Walk thee in it, you know.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping to do is that you crack open a little portal and a bit of light comes in, and then you just keep opening it up. And so it's giving them not only the what, but the how do they do this? What are they going to do next? What's their next step? And I think most of the time it's up here. It's reshaping your concept of what does it mean to prepare your sons to be
Yes.
amazing young men. part of the why my husband and I homeschool, because you've got to figure out a why, because on a really black day when everything falls apart, you need to know your why, otherwise you'll just stop. So part of that was that we wanted to raise responsible young adults who knew how to think and not what to think. So that often became the way how we would decide what to do. So you can see that if that was our foundational mission statement, if you like, why what you're doing is so exciting to me to get an interview with you so that I can show other parents, here, look over here, go to Maxim's site, see what he's doing, read. When the book comes out, buy it. um, I just want to touch very quickly. Can you just tell me how much time you still have available, please, Maxim? I might have to ditch some things I want to ask you.
I've got about 20 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Sweet. We can do that. In the traditional way of thinking, when you get asked, what are you going to do when you grow up?
Hmm.
If your child is bright, they go to university. If your child is what they tactfully call good with their hands, in other words, not
Yeah. Right.
academically astute, they'll go into a trade. So it became a way of separating the sheep from the goats, if you like. So, and you knew without asking someone that if their son went to university, he had brains. If he went into the trades or just went out into working a job, not so much, or at least lack of motivation. Trying to get rid of that mindset because it came up in a group that we're both associated with, that to go into the trades meant that you didn't have to need more education. And I couldn't disagree more. What we need are men trained in trades and skills that don't have degrees, who are incredibly well educated, very well read in historical, intelligent books that continue to stretch your boundaries and continue to educate you. And it's been an excuse for the past few, maybe couple of generations, that if you go into a trade, you don't have to do any of that anymore because you don't need it, you know, like you don't need it. Yes, you
Yeah.
do. And I'd like to, can you talk about, I think you have pretty much anyway, but it's talk to the mindset of those parents who are still struggling with that attitude of how to reshape that.
Well, I think first off, the whole the question in of itself, the what do you want to do when you grow up question is the perhaps one of the most foolish questions you can ask a person and expect them to answer. Especially asking an 18-year-old that, I still don't know what I want to do. And to expect me to know that there is one thing, a hyper specialized thing that I presumably will do for the rest of my life is insane. I think people, I think there's quite a lot of people who are very comfortable with doing one thing their entire lives, but anyone that I throughout history that I have actually looked up to because they're impressive did not stick to one avenue, one thing for their entire lives. Their path was their own and it branched out in ways that even they could not really understand. I mean, take Louis L'Amour, for example, was the great Western author. He left home at, I believe it was 14 or 15 years old during, I think it was just before the Great Depression. And he lived in North Dakota. He left home and he became a hobo, meaning he would just travel around on the railroads looking for work. So he worked many different jobs. He was an elephant handler for a short period of time, a cattle skinner. He worked on mines and he was a lumberjack. He was a seaman. He did so many different things just in the first, when he was still a child, even though he was more of a man than most men are today. And all of those experiences and skills he acquired in the real world had no connection with each other, and he had no intention of making them a thing that would encompass his entire life. He wasn't going to be a lumberjack his entire life. He was doing these odd jobs all over the place, traveling across the world when he was a seaman. And then all of those experiences and skills and stories he acquired, and all of the reading he did within those years, led to him becoming one of the world's best writers after he came back from World War II. And he sold, I think it was over 200 million copies or 300 million copies. And his books were translated into over 15 different languages because he found his thing. But that was, I think he must have been in his 40s at that point. That was a long ways down the line, and he did so many different things. So he was a clearly impressive man, and to use that question and to put it on him or on his life in retrospect after looking at all he did would be dumb. It would be dumb. So I think that it's where the preparation fits in there is it's allowing for the possibility that you may find something that you want to do for the rest of your life, but at the same time you're gaining, as I said many times, skills in different areas. And part of those are trades-based skills. Could be welding, could be um, carpentry or electrical work, it could be plumbing. But in the same 4 years, you are doing very academic things. You are taking academic courses, you're reading lots of books, there's not a separation between those two different, like, there's not a separation between the academics and the trades. It's all encompassing in this program. So, yeah.
Mm. How do you choose which books to read? You did say that you found that the best books are about 100 years old. Yep, that's a good place. But how do you choose what's on your list?
Well, my list is changing all the time, and we're starting to make lots of progress with the book, and with that, we are further developing the program and getting to a point where things are more structured. Because basically, up until now, all of what I did, all the things I read, were just, unless there was a specific recommendation from my father, it was all just based upon my interests at the time. So for a short period of time, I was reading all about copywriting and marketing. And I think there was a little bit of sales within that. A period of time, I was reading lots of history books. And right now, I'm reading Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, as well as a few different other just fictional books. So there's up until this point, there's really been no rhyme or reason as to what I read, except just purely out of interest. But as we're developing this program more, we're breaking the year up um, into quarters. So how the program will be structured is that there's 3 months, 4 quarters in a year, and for each quarter, you are assigned at least a few different books to read, and they all fit into the same theme. So one theme, where maybe the anchor course, we call it the anchor, like that's your main objective, could be taking a 1 month cooking class in Florence, Italy. Well, then all of the secondary or academic courses are going to be based around Rome or Roman history and Florentine history, and any of the books will be based around that time period. And that's just one quarter you can choose from. And you can mix and match, choose which ones you want. Some quarters will have science-based uh, academic learning. including books. Some will be about history, some will be about economics. So it'll be much more structured going into the future. But I guess to answer your original question, I just choose what I read because I see something that looks interesting. That's all.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it must ripple out. One book must introduce you to another idea.
Some do for sure, but as long as I mean, the nice thing about the preparation as well is that it forces you to think more about everything you do and think that everything that you do is working towards your personal progress in one way or another. So the things you read about, I mean, just for example, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, that was published in 1776. The first section, all about the division of labor and economics, that economic principle. When I was actually studying economics for a short period this time last year, on the ranch here in Uruguay, we were doing artificial inseminations with the cows. So five or six of us were all working, and then I go, oh, this is the division of labor. We each have our own jobs that we specialize in, which makes the process go along much more smoothly. And it was a very, very interesting moment. But that's where the preparation, like I said, where it comes in and it forces you to think about how what you're reading applies to the real world or why it matters in some way.
Mm.
So
I think a lot of what's in the book, and I'd like to stop and talk about that in a minute. Um, Many homeschoolers would already have started what Doug and Matt have and yourself are laying out in the book. So in a way, many home educating families are going to get a head start on this. So they won't have to wait until they're 17, 18, finish school to begin the preparation. It would already have started because that's the mindset of most, I would say, homeschooling families. So going over to the book, then I realize it's probably in its early days. I can see that what is being written is going to be of immense value and help to homeschoolers, especially who don't feel very confident as to how are we going to move down this track here. Um, any idea when is the book going to be like delayed? You're doing this over 4 years. Is the book going to track you over 4 years? What are the thoughts?
so we started writing it um about a year ago, I think. There's been lots of delays on it, which I think overall the delays have been a good thing because it's helped us formulate all the ideas um, properly. But we're at a point now where we're making very consistent progress, and we think we can get it done in the next couple months. So sometime at the beginning of next year. And it's using some of my experience thus far, but we'll just stick with what we have because I think it, or we all think it proves the point. The 1 year worth of experience will be added in there, along with the moral code section, along with the economics section, and the different philosophies that go along with that, as well as talking about finding mentors and the proper relationship between a mentor and mentee. That'll be just like you're mentioning about Chris McIntosh. That'll be a part of the book as well. And then the big chunk of the book will be about where to go to learn specific skills, how much it'll cost, how much time it'll take, and we'll also give examples of those short quarters that I was talking about that will lay out um, exactly what a person could do within a 3 month time frame, and we'll give people lots of options of so that they can pick and choose which ones to do whenever they want to. So really, it'll be those different sections of the book, and we'll stick with what little experience I have thus far, add that to the book, and then hopefully publish it at the beginning of this next upcoming year.
So it's not too far away, really.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Can't wait to see it. Can you think of anything, Maxim, that we haven't talked about yet, but you thought you would really like to when this whole podcast idea came up?
Well, I think we covered something that I wanted to talk about eventually on one podcast, which was the question you brought up about that everybody gets asked. All young people get asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? So that was really the thing that I was happy to talk about. So no, I don't really think there's anything else. I think we hit upon some good points in this podcast here. Is there
Mm.
anything else that you think is worth mentioning in relation to the preparation or um, how the preparation and homeschooling go together? What do you think?
I'm really happy with what we've covered so far. It's been an amazing introduction. I get the feeling that we could drill down into some specifics quite well, especially that the how you went about it, like you mentioned, and I read with interest a couple of weeks ago about you killing a beast and how you went and what you felt about it and everything. And I thought that's a really practical thing to know about and the why you even had to do it, right from the perspective of needing to provide for your family, you know. We're
Yeah.
so removed from doing anything like that. So um, to know a lot about a little would be really, really kind of helpful. So look, maybe we can touch base and just it actually would be really interesting to now get feedback from homeschooling parents and say, why didn't you ask him about this? I was wanting to hear that. And
Yeah.
maybe that would be more specific. So I think what we've done is a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much. Um, I think this is an amazing option for home educating families, and it's thank you. Thank you for your incredible generosity of sitting down like this and giving your valuable time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Christine, and I hope maybe after some feedback from the homeschooling parents that and maybe after the book gets published, we could meet together again and talk a little bit more about things. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, I hope so because what you're doing will have a special market, let's say a market appeal to a whole lot of people.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you again, Christine. I really appreciate you having me, and I sincerely enjoyed this conversation we had today. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much again.